that I am a pre-recording, okay? I'm not actually here right now. I had an appointment on Monday morning, so I am not here, but I did want to make a video so you and I could continue our conversation on bending and vibrato and all that sort of thing. And of course, it would give you something to work on for this week to prep for next week when I will be here, all right? So thank you everybody for being here. I sure do appreciate it. And if you want to leave some comments and that sort of thing of how you're doing, how your weekend was, all that sort of thing, when I get back, I would love to read them and say hello to you. Okay, so please do so. So let's go ahead and get started on our Monday guitar motivation for today. What we're doing is we're combining the last 2 weeks of conversation. We had vibrato, and then last week we were learning about bending. Well, this week what we want to do is combine those two elements together. And again, it might seem like a very obvious thing, but if you've never done it before or you're just not really comfortable with it, then it's something we should talk about and try and develop. Because again, for me, I think things like bending and vibrato and sliding and all those sorts of things are incredibly important to the vocal aspect of your guitar playing when you solo or whatever it is you might be doing. And oftentimes, if we don't fully develop those, we feel nervous with them and we don't use them as much as we should. Certainly when we're jamming with people or, performing or whatever, if we don't feel confident with those things. And I think they're really important. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the two elements. Vibrato, we talked about how with vibrato, you can pull the string toward the floor or push it toward the ceiling. I pull the string toward the floor. Either way, what you're doing is creating tension on that string, which is raising the pitch. So what you're doing is you're rocking your wrist, not doing this with your fingers, but rocking the wrist like this, okay? And if you don't know this, go back and watch one of those earlier Monday guitar motivations on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you are, okay? So as you rock that wrist, you're taking the pitch, which was in tune, and you're making it slightly out of tune. But then you're bringing it back in tune and then slightly out of tune again, and that's the way a vibrato is going to work. And what you're doing is you're trying to create a nice smooth waveform, okay? You can decide how wide it is, you can decide how fast it is, anything like that is entirely up to you. But when you play a phrase, you decide what you want that to sound like. A bend, which we talked about last week, is basically the same idea, but what you're doing is you're pushing toward the ceiling, okay? And you're going to turn that wrist like you're opening a doorknob. But the big difference here is that you've got a pitch directive. You're trying to get to a pitch and match that pitch. So if I'm on the 7th fret of the 3rd string, and again, if you don't know this, you can go back and watch the other video. I actually have on Steve Stine Guitar on YouTube, there's a playlist that Monday Guitar Motivation. You can find all these in there. So 7th fret here, I want to go up to 9th fret. So I'm trying to match that pitch. That's what we talked about last week. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to talk about adding week number 1 to week number 2, which is adding that vibrato. So what we've done here is we've reached the pitch that we want with that bend, okay? And now what we want to do is we want to dip that bend down just a little bit and then re-engage back to the same spot we were in. So that's how we're going to create this vibrato, is we're doing that bend and then we're dipping down just a little bit. It doesn't have to be, halfway or anything like that. It's just a little bit of the difference here is that when you did the bend, of course, you're creating all of this tension on that string. When you do the vibrato now, it's just the opposite. You're releasing that tension and then bringing the tension back up again. And it's very, very important that you re-engage with that pitch that you released or you reached it when you did your bend, which I always call a static pitch. It's the pitch we want to get to, okay? So when we do this bend, that's our static pitch. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to release just a little bit and then head back toward that static pitch again. And you want to make sure that you're creating, again, a nice smooth waveform that has 2 points. The pitch that you bent to, which we're calling the static pitch, and then the pitch that we've created with the vibrato. And we're going back and forth between those 2 pitches. If you don't do that, you wind up getting some pretty crazy sounds. If you try and do your bend, and you do this, it's going to sound really weird, and it's not going to sound very professional, and you don't want to do that. So again, in the beginning, don't worry about how fast the vibrato is or how wide the vibrato is. Don't worry about those kinds of things. Just focus on getting to the pitch, matching that pitch like we did last week. Hopefully you worked on that, because without that, none of this makes any difference, okay? You've got to match that pitch. So when you bend it up and then you create your vibrato, do it nice and slow and just move back and forth between those two spots. And as you get more comfortable with the motion of being able to drop it down and bring it back up and drop it down and bring it back up, as you get that kind of functioning for you, the next step then is to start what we'll call rocking, which is really just allowing this to happen very smooth. See, when I do it really slow, I can really feel those 2 points. As I get more comfortable with this, I can start speeding this up. Okay? And all of a sudden, it feels more like my wrist is just kind of moving back and forth in that rocking motion. And oftentimes what will happen is you'll start seeing the neck will move a little bit. It's just a natural occurrence that happens from me doing this bending and vibrato. So it's not that, the neck has to move for you or something like that, or the neck is doing the work. It's not. It's me doing the work, but the neck is just responding, obviously by moving a little bit when I'm doing that, okay? So think about that a little bit. Now, as we're trying to get comfortable with this, the last thing I want you to think about, last 2 things maybe. Number 1 is, just like we talked about with the vibrato in week 1, you need to decide on a couple of different parameters. Number 1, how wide you want that vibrato and how fast you want that vibrato, just like in week 1. You can decide those things. Also, you can decide when the vibrato becomes engaged. So when you play a pattern or an idea, you can decide to hit that pitch and then wait and then engage the vibrato. So, and that's the way I like to do it most of the time, but it depends on the circumstance. But your 2 choices are either you're going to engage that vibrato right away after you've done the bend, right? Or you're going to allow that pitch to sit and then you're going to engage the vibrato. And I like to do that more because I can make sure that I've hit the pitch that I want. And it also sounds more vocal, if you will, to be able to hit that note that I want and then wind up engaging. Wait just a little bit. And then engage with that vibrato like that. So that's what I would do. But again, who knows? I mean, I'm sure I do it both ways and it doesn't make any difference, but just be aware of that. So once you get used to the action of doing the bend and then adding that vibrato, finding that point and then moving back and forth, then what you want to do is you want to explore rocking, deciding how fast and how wide you want that vibrato. And then finally, when to engage that vibrato, okay? Whether you do it right away after the bend or whether you wait just a little bit. And if you were here for week 1 of this discussion, we talked about that where you could play a note and you could hang out for a while. And then add the vibrato a little while afterwards. Now, you don't always have to do that. And if you want to add it right away, that's okay too. But that's something to think about. And then the last thing, which is less important, but I think we should still touch on it, is once you've engaged that vibrato on that bend, at some point, you're going to either leave or disengage the vibrato. Okay? So for instance, for me, I talk a lot about what we can call escape routes or exit strategies or whatever. When you're playing something, when you get done, you have to decide where you're going to go. So if you're engaged in this vibrato right here, I'm either going to, again, engage by moving to another string, and we'll talk more about these in the next coming weeks as well, or I'm just going to stop doing the vibrato and come back down. So I might take that vibrato and all of a sudden it kind of slows up a little bit, and then it stops, and then I can dip down and take off and leave. Or I could stop the vibrato and then attach to something and leave that way too. And again, we'll talk more about that next week and so on, but just something to think about a little bit, that you're not stuck there forever. Once you start that vibrato, you can always disengage the vibrato and then decide where you want to go from there too. So anyway, hopefully that helps you a little bit. Sorry I couldn't be here today, but I did want to make sure that you have something to work on this week. So again, if you want to comment, please do, and I'll read those when I get done with what I'm doing. And stay positive, take care. If you're looking for any guitar lesson material, any education stuff, head over to guitarzoom.com, check out the guitar courses and the memberships that we offer, and subscribe to whatever channels. It always helps me and the team out. It's a really great thing for you to do. So most important, stay positive, keep practicing, and